So in recent years, as the beloved science fiction epic Dune has garnered significant attention for its breathtaking visuals and compelling storyline, it has also been received quite well by both sides of the Western political divide, despite its political undertones. Among some conservative circles, Dune has even been labeled as anti-woke. The Critical Drinker, Ben Shapiro, Nerdrotic, they all loved this movie, even though it apparently has undertones that are anti-Western and possibly anti-capitalism. But that's a long enough intro. Here's 3 reasons why the conservatives love it, and at the end, 2 reasons that all isn't what it seems. Number 1, Dune does not attack structures based on non-representative factors. For instance, one thing that conservatives, and basically everyone, really hate is when movies essentially run on the promise that non-representative identities like male or female have moral weight. Movies where, for instance, the strong female characters can't shut up about how their lives have been ruined by all men because all men are evil, and end up even treating their teammates badly because they're men. It's pretty obvious as to why this makes no sense. Like, bad is bad, tyranny is bad, slimy, untrustworthy, that's bad, not all men are bad, also women are bad, and we used to have a word for saying shit like that. Yes, it was called sexism. In Dune, the positive and negative traits of specific people in the world, whether on the side of House Atreides or on the side of the Empire, are not stupidly leveled at entire groups of people. See, people just don't like being made fun of in ways that are non-representative of actual realities. Like if a character says, "I don't like women, they smell weird," that's a bit funny and can be played off as such, especially if they at least have some other things that they like about their fellow human beings, aka women. When a character consistently doesn't like anything about men or women, they are sexist. They're basically villainous and should be portrayed as such. And to portray them as heroic without them learning their lesson and changing would be uncomfortable and unsatisfying, and so would be a completely idiotic story. Also known as the Charlie's Angels reboot or Birds of Prey. You can pick your poison. Number 2, Dune is pro-life. Is Dune pro-life? Ben Shapiro seems to think so. I mean, I guess if you are talking to a baby in the womb in a movie, like the character, like it's a human being, then it's not an animal or just a cluster of cells, is it? It's a human character, it's casted, it's played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Anyway, that's enough biology for today. Number 3, great movies or art are non-partisan by nature. Some people have said that if you really break down what Dune is referencing historically and trying to tell us, it is woke, it is left-leaning, because Arrakis is basically a Middle Eastern or African country, blah blah blah. But much like when conservatives take one line and make it the political parallel of an entire movie, this is the problem with everything being analyzed allegorically and politically, which, as I said in a video on why Frank Herbert's competitor and contemporary J.R.R. Tolkien said, it's a very bad thing that we don't have to do. Let's take The Lord of the Rings versus Dune again on this channel for the 2nd time this month. Tolkien writes a story that can seem to be an allegory for the Roman Empire and also parts of the English Empire because it was what he loved and what he cared about at the time. So actually, he kind of hated Rome and he stole parts of their history to critique them as well as praise them in his story, but you get the point. And Frank Herbert, very smart man, very smart writer. Even if he wasn't as anti-allegorical interpretation as Tolkien, his story is still great because, as I said at the start of this, while you can talk about how Dune is an allegory for Western imperial forces taking advantage of Asian and African countries, Dune storytelling makes sure that it is different enough, waters down history in some places, exaggerates it in others, that it can stand on its own. And so if you take a stance like, oh, Dune is a critique of Islam, you start to miss the point. The reason Paul is able to launch his holy war isn't because of Islamic fanaticism, but of the fact that there is religious fanaticism as a whole. And so, rather than Dune being a critique of Islam alone, it is a critique and observation that can be made about humanity's relationship towards religious ideology as a whole. And then you can apply that to his critique of imperialism. Like, obviously, in real life, it isn't only the West that's acted imperialistically or moves to exploit weaker nations. If you know anything about history or current world affairs, obviously not. And so while of course Dune has chosen things to parallel, it's still great fiction because its critique of the idea of imperialism isn't deliberately levied against one group, at least not in its execution. The personal or political opinions of Frank Herbert, even if they are polarizing, much like Tolkien, do not matter. That's not what makes their works great. But even with all this subtlety, there's still some people reaching on both sides, like conservatives saying that Chani is a piece of action movie feminism, another strong female character. Like, I know her fighting hand-to-hand combat with the Sardaukar makes it kind of weird because it's supposed to be some of the most elitely trained fighters in the universe. They literally murdered the entire Atreides squadron snuck up on them as well, but you know, they did in the last movie. But they've already shown us that she's incredibly skilled too. She's also basically Padme in Attack of the Clones or Phantom Menace. And so getting worked up about it is, I think, a bit dumb and uncalled for. We've had Padme, we've had Eowyn. The action heroineness is there, but it's subtle, it's very much justified. Let it go, people. Chani isn't another SJW character. And then we have the liberals, and their Paul is a white savior. And this story is basically Pocahontas. It's jungle fever. It's like, come on, once again. I mean, when you bring it up, kind of is, but it's subtle, so subtle that it's basically nitpicking to have this be an actual problem with this glorious story. Like, grow up, stop looking for things to complain about, enjoy the movie. In my opinion, the critique of religious ideology when it comes to Paul's rise to power is way more important than what race he is. And it's so odd that some people have gotten worked up about it. Also, we have to understand that there is a strong difference between depicting and promoting in movies, which in the case of Paul's savior status, I mean, just watch Chani's reactions and you'll know that this is promotional material for the Muad'Dib world tour, as Frank Herbert intended the exact opposite. Like, Paul Atreides is literally Anakin Vader Skywalker if he really liked sand. Now, does this movie have a political meaning? Of course it does. No piece of art really doesn't. The thing is just that when a movie or art is great like this movie is, it doesn't stoop to the level of propaganda. It's more subtle, and we're the ones who have to be careful to not only see the parallels to our current day specific situations. Like, think of a painting of the English countryside with its people. In one age, it might be something for people to long for, as maybe people don't see sights like that anymore. And perhaps in a different age, it's a cool reminder of the aristocracy that steps on the necks of its people. But it's just a painting of a countryside with people. I'm starting to realize that a lot of times the messages aren't in the art, especially if they're not stated overtly. The message is what the art pulls out of us.